Welcome to the Inappropriate Growth Podcast, where we explore the ins and outs of business growth with a twist. Today, we're thrilled to have a titan of tax law, Pietro E. Canestrelli, joining us. With over 25 years of experience, including a prestigious stint at the IRS National Office in Washington, D.C., Pietro is the go-to expert for navigating the treacherous waters of tax controversy, whether it's battling it out in U.S. tax court, advising on high-stakes mergers and acquisitions, or guiding clients through complex tax litigation. He's got the insights and strategies that make a difference. As a certified specialist in taxation law, Pietro brings a wealth of knowledge and an LLM in taxation to the table. So get ready as we dive deep into the crazy, crazy world of taxes with the master himself. Let's do this. Welcome to Inappropriate Growth, the podcast where we get real about the grind behind the glory. I'm Paul, your host, and I'm here to take you on a journey through the untold stories of business triumphs. We might raise some eyebrows, but it's all about the hustle and we don't fit the mold. Here we're talking about the kind of effort that doesn't just push the envelope, it shreds it to pieces. We're building a community where the norm is to defy norms. So buckle up, because we're diving deep into the beginnings that were anything but humble. The times when giving up seemed like the only option. We'll also dig into all of those wild, insane, and out-of-the-box strategies that led to massive growth. From growth hacks to best practices, this podcast will be fast, furious, and should be a whole lot of fun. Join us as we redefine what it means to grow and turn business growth into an art form. Welcome to Inappropriate Growth. All right. I'm excited. Let's get started. Welcome to the Inappropriate Growth Podcast. Happy today to have Pietro Canestrelli, all the way from Temecula, California. I hope I said
that was perfect.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and just stop here.
All right.
All right, Pietro, where you are and how you got there and why you're there.
Okay. So where I'm at is I am an owner of 2 law firms and a tax resolution business. I've been a tax attorney for 25, going on 26 years now. Started my career with the IRS. So I was working for the bad guys for the first 6 years of my career. Shouldn't say bad guys. No one I ever met at the IRS were evil or anything like that. It's just the nature of the beast.
Well, they're probably your opponent in a lot of your current work.
Yeah, they are my opponent. They are my adversary. I much prefer working to help taxpayers than to kind of working against them. It's a lot greater job satisfaction.
That's been a common theme for at least 2,000 years. Tax collectors were just bad people. They were usually the villains.
Well, you can't have civilization without taxes. I mean, tax is a prerequisite to have any type of civilization. So you have to have a way to have a common pile of grain or, pile of rocks or gold coins or money or something that can, that will run the state, the government. And you have to have taxes. Taxes built the pyramids. Taxes, they invented writing specifically for taxes, to keep track of how many cows, UGG brought in, and making sure that, and a proof that, hey, I brought in my 5 cows. I don't owe any more taxes. The famous Rosetta Stone that they used to decipher Egyptian hieroglyphs. You know what that is? And that's actually a tax document. It is a document that exempts a particular temple from having to pay taxes. And they wrote it in 3 different languages, so it would be loud and clear that, hey, This temple doesn't have to pay tax. So that's how we figured out how hieroglyphics work. So
the
tax
more they change, the more they stay the same.
The tax, yeah, it basically is what we call a determination letter. I mean, you do the same thing to be exempt nowadays. You get a letter from the IRS. It's not carved in black granite. It's on a piece of paper, but it's the exact same thing. You're tax exempt. We're not going to tax you.
All right. Well, Pietro, you have over 2 decades of experience in tax law.
2.5, yeah.
What's the most significant change you've witnessed in tax legislation, and what's been that impact on taxpayers?
Yeah. So I think something most people have never heard of, which is the codification of the non-economic substance. And that was, I do believe, back in 2009, 2010. There is something called the non-economic substance doctrine, which basically says if you just do a transaction only for tax purposes, there's no real economic change, the IRS can ignore it. They codified it into and that was a judicial doctrine. They codified it, they added additional penalties, and basically the IRS has used that over and over to attack a lot of different type of transactions. And they just use it more frequently and more frequently. They think it's a big hammer. Now, my interpretation of the codification is that it didn't change the underlying doctrine, but that's not the IRS's view. So what I do is basically tax controversy, which is I'm fighting with the IRS in court, at administrative hearings, all that sort of thing. And this comes up a lot. And I think it's very significant. If I had a magic wand, I would curtail this particular code section and not allow the IRS to use it in the ways they have been using it.
Got it. Well, and you're a certified specialist in taxation law.
That is correct. And I'm under California Bar Association. I'm designated a certified tax specialist. There's probably, last time I looked, there's about 200 of us in the state, and that's our total bar is over 200,000. So basically 1 in 1,000 people get this designation. And I also have what is called a master's degree in law in taxation. So those are my 2 big academic and professional designations, but it really is my 25-year experience that is more important to clients and resolving cases than those.
What would you say then, with that amount of specification, what would you say is the most common misconception that people have about tax controversies?
The most common is that the IRS is right and you can't fight the IRS. Over 2/3 of audits go unopposed, meaning they don't fight. I have spent a 19-year career outside of the IRS proving the IRS is wrong at audits and saving my client tens of millions of dollars in the process. So yes, an IRS auditor can be wrong. They're frequently wrong. But most people don't want to poke the bear. They're scared of the IRS. IRS leverages this, and I don't mean in an evil way, mean way, but in a way that they assume that the taxpayer is just going to take the audit line down and they're going to start paying the taxes on it. And that is the wrong attitude to take. You should fight for your rights as a taxpayers. We're blessed in this country to have taxpayer rights, and one of them is to fight an audit. You don't have to pay to fight an audit. You could take it to appeals. You could take it to United States Tax Court, and quite simply, most people never even think of this option because they're scared. They're worried that the IRS will double down on them, and which is not possible. And
It reminds me of my dad used to say whenever
Right.
I would give me a punishment, and then it would come out that I didn't actually do what I got punished for. And he would say,
Right.
"Well, that's for all the things I didn't catch you doing."
right.
So
So
you want to just tell what you're ahead.
the IRS, I've said this before, the IRS is like a bad stepfather. No, and the taxpayer is the stepchild, and the stepchild doesn't want to have any interaction with the stepdad because it's never going to end up good. The most they could hope for is a tie where they're not abused. So, and I'm talking about bad stepfathers, not good. I'm sure there's tons of good stepfathers out there, but people are scared, and that is not right. Um, we have the highest compliance rate of any developed country. Everybody talks, well, in tax circles, IRS likes to talk about the tax gap, meaning we're supposed to be collecting 25% more of taxes. And that's because everybody's cheating on their tax return. Well, we have the highest compliance rate of anybody in the country. Most Americans want to pay their correct amount of taxes. We should also exercise our rights when the IRS audits you to fight. So that's if you're going to get one thing from that podcast, I want business owners to get that. Fight an audit. Don't just accept it.
Right. Well, I know I'm gathering that your experience with the IRS helped further whatever inspiration you already had to specialize in tax law. But I'm wondering, what was the original inspiration? I mean, what got you to the IRS? Were they just hiring that day, or
basically yes?
Okay, and then
the IRS is like any area of the government. They don't hire by need; they hire when they get money. So they actually had some money to hire more attorneys. And I had a connection when I was in law school. A great tax professor had connections with the IRS. And I would like to say that I got this job by my own merit, but no. They interviewed me. I had no idea what to say. I guess they wanted to make sure that I wasn't a serial killer. And I basically got hired by the good word of Daniel Simmons at UC Davis, tax professor. He got me the job.
Well, okay. What's the secret of maintaining a passion after what?
Well, the passion really started after I left the IRS.
Okay, makes sense.
Because helping taxpayers go through this sometimes horrifying, sometimes suicidal episode of their life, and having them get through this and giving them a giant chunk of their life back,
right,
is what drives not only me but my firm. Our motto is we practice law with passion and compassion, educating and advocating for our taxpayer clients so they could sleep at night. And there is a lot of tax attorneys out there, but when we hire, we're hiring professionals that have all the experience, but we're really hiring the people that have that passion and compassion. And we go through a multi-phase interview process and questionnaire process because we want those people. We want people who actually care about the taxpayer clients we deal with, have a passion to do this, but the compassion not only extends to the clients, but also to IRS personnel. They don't have a fun job. Most of them are not happy in their job. I know this from experience. They get cussed at, they get threatened all the time. We don't operate like that. We treat everyone like professionals. They have their job to do. We have our job to do. And, if we could educate the IRS personnel at the same time and get a meeting of minds, that's the best resolution.
Oh, and I know working with law firms, law firms are a people business.
Right.
That said, technology is constantly changing. I mean, constantly changing. It's changed since we started this interview.
Right.
How has the role of technology evolved in your practice, especially with dealing with the IRS or, I guess, different states or other tax authorities?
Right. So with the IRS, they've really to collect more taxes, they've emphasized a lot of automation. They have audit letters that go out, and a great example of this is you sell your home. You don't report it correctly to get the 250,000 to 500,000 exemption from taxes. The IRS sends you 3 letters that are automated letters. If you don't respond to that third letter or 1, 2, 3 letters, any of those letters, it goes final and you owe taxes, even though under the law you don't. You just filed incorrectly. These are called correspondent audits. And I think they're incredibly abusive because nobody calls you. A regular audit, somebody calls you, somebody mails you, and then they show up in their door. They talk to you. They have a human interaction. This is 3 letters that you're sent. Maybe you don't even live there anymore. Maybe you're so scared you're throwing them in the garbage. Either way, all of a sudden you owe $100,000 in tax where under the law you shouldn't. So what we have done, and this is all automated, they don't, it's generated by computers. What we have done is work with AI to do, initial drafts of responses of typical IRS letters and notices. Now, a legal assistant will look at it, an attorney will look at it too, but to as an efficiency, because every IRS letter has its own number, every form they have and notice, they have their own number. So our AI could read that, generate the initial response, so we could get this sent in timely. So AI is going to be used against the IRS like they've been using it for the last decade against taxpayers.
Okay. All right. You mentioned earlier, you talked about your LLM in taxation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about the importance of that, especially
the
importance for your practice, as well as how does it benefit your clients? Why would a client prefer to have that certification?
Well, a regular law degree is called a Juris Doctorate. And I always want to be called Dr. Canestrelli, even though that's not the custom. And every attorney should be called doctor, but that's not the custom because we have Juris Doctorates. Right. And that's the basic law degree you need in California to allow you to sit for the exam. You have to pass the exam to become an actual attorney. All right. An LLM is something you do after you're done with the JD and have passed that. And it's another degree. And I know for the academics out there, they're thinking, wait a minute, you get a master's after you get a doctorate? That doesn't make any sense. But yeah, this is the way it works in law. We're kind of topsy-turvy that way. But you get a master's in law, which means you have actually done, a full year of coursework only on tax. So, and it's very broad based. So you know a lot about tax controversy, a lot about partnership, corporation taxes, trust tax, estate and gift tax. It gives you a very broad base of knowledge. Now, that with my experience, there's not a lot of things that are, I would say I have no idea what this is in the tax world because I have the academic base and the experience. Very few things I don't in least recognize what it is and possible solutions. So if you're looking for a tax attorney, an LLM is a good signifier that this person actually knows their stuff. But again, experience is very important. So I would ask, if you're looking for somebody to do tax controversy, ask him, how many cases have they done? How many cases have they had in tax court? How many cases
tax
have,
controversy? This is just when the IRS says you owe more than you paid, or
well, there's two. I divide tax law into two sections. One is what I call transactional, and we do a little bit of that, and we do more and more of that all the time. The other one is, you're right, controversy is again into two sections. One is you get an audit letter, or you come to the end of the audit and the IRS says, oh, guess what, you owe $150,000. And then we take over. We take it to appeals courts, IRS appeals, U.S. tax court, federal district court, whatever we need to resolve or win the case. The other area of tax controversy is when you already owe. You didn't call us in time, and you owe that $150,000. You can't pay $150,000. You don't have $150,000. You're probably never going to have $150,000. So how do you deal with the IRS? Well, the IRS, if you don't have representation, is really going to push you and levy you and talk you into doing things that you really shouldn't be doing. Having a tax professional helps you do an offer in compromise, or gets you in what is called non-collective status, or allows you to file for what is called innocent spouse relief. All the things that are on the code in the books that could help somebody with a large liability. We have every tool in our tool chest to work those type of cases also.
All right. Well, we talked about technology, but I'm thinking maybe I just sense that there's some old school practicing going on too in your practice. Yeah. And I'm wondering what kind of strategies you employ that kind of make you more bulletproof, and to stay updated with the changing tax laws and the changing regulations.
Right. So what we do is we have procedural handbooks that we are constantly changing depending on case law and regulations and other published guidance that come out. So we will look at any new case law, and we get that from the various sources, and we will say, well, do we have to change this? One recent example is the IRS lost on a penalty case about 4 months ago, because it wasn't approved by, the penalty was assessed but not approved by the auditor supervisor, which is required. And so we changed our procedure to focus on that and say, hey, if you got a penalty, here, we know what procedure to do to get that penalty removed, because guess what? They for years they were not getting supervisors approval on these penalties. So everything that comes up is folded into our procedures, so we could best represent the client.
And that's the benefit, I guess, of experience in doing these again and again and again.
It's exactly, if I can't emphasize, it's nice to have, if you're looking for a tax attorney, it's nice to have an LLM. It's nice to have some kind of certified, but do they do 3 cases a year, or they do 300 like we do? Have they done 1,000 cases? Have they done 10 cases? All that knowledge of not just the procedures, but I run into the same IRS people over and over again. I know who wants to litigate, who is going to be more fair and open, all that stuff. And a firm has a reputation in the service, IRS also. And if you know your stuff, I don't want to say they're scared or nervous, but they have a certain amount of respect. So they're going to listen to what you say a little bit more than someone they've never run into. Someone who does every type of law a little bit is not going to represent you the same as someone who does tax all the time. I mean, if you want to get a divorce, you're not going to hire a bankruptcy attorney, right? So same thing with tax attorneys. If you have a tax problem, you really need a tax attorney. They're not that easy to find. There's a lot more of the other kind of attorneys, but yeah, find a tax attorney for tax problems. Don't roll the dice on someone who doesn't have experience.
All right. Well, right now, in your opinion, and from what
Yeah.
you're seeing today, what's the biggest challenge facing taxpayers today? And how could they better prepare for it if you could
Right.
get out in front of it, I guess?
Okay. So number one is, I think everybody's heard it, 38,000 more auditors. They're trying to get online. They're having a hard time training them all, but I know there's a ton more, and the audit rates are going to probably triple. So if you're a business owner, assume you're going to get audited. And that means, and how do you prepare for that? Well, that means number one, get good records, have a good bookkeeper, have, everybody asks, how long should I keep records for tax purposes? And I say, if you're a business, forever. There's no reason why you can't have a file in the cloud that has every single receipt, every single invoice, all your records of your business, and keep it in perpetuity. You don't have to, rent a storage facility to keep these records anymore. You should be scanning them and putting them on the cloud and having them just in case. The second thing is, when you get that audit letter, immediately contact a tax attorney, because you are going to say the wrong thing. You're going to be you're going to have absolutely no idea what you're doing.
The only thing more expensive than hiring the attorney that you need in that situation is not hiring.
Right. Remember, the IRS person is going to be nice and pleasant, but she has her job to do, and she knows how to do her job, and she knows what questions to ask and what answers she wants from you. You have no idea. You're a business owner. You're good at your business, but you have no idea how this game is played.
Right.
And you want to be nice, and you want to hope that for the best, and assume that if you're pleasant to her and you comply with everything she says, they're going to have mercy on you. It's not a question of mercy. It's a question of they have this job to do. And their job at the audit level is basically to hit you with as much tax as possible. They're not going to make up anything, but they're not going to give you the benefit of the doubt.
And
Everything's
they're not looking for any missed deductions. They're looking for missed payments.
they're right. Yeah, they're not saying, "Oh, you should have deducted this. Why, we owe you. We're going to give it. We'll send you a refund." No, they're looking for, did you underreport income, and are these real deductions, made up deductions, non-business expenses? And if you don't have the documentation, which is called substantiation, they're going to just deny everything. And they could go back 3 years, so you could have 3 years. And trust me, for a business, it's devastating. If you're a business that may be doing okay, having a $400,000 tax liability is, maybe we can't be in business anymore. And
I was in my late teens, 18, 19 years old, when my father was audited with his restaurant. And I watched him age
right.
10 years in that, 2-week process.
Right. All new IRS employees are audited. So I got to be audited right after law school, right when I joined the IRS. And it was a very unpleasant experience. Looking back, very simple audit, no real issues, but it was extremely stressful for me. So I remember when I talk to potential clients, I always remember the time that I was audited and how stressful they are.
They're not working for you. It's like if you use the insurance company's lawyer in a
Right.
car accident.
Right.
All right. Well, during your career, you've represented clients in various courts in different
Right.
administrative settings. Do you have to adapt your approach anyway to kind of fit nuances of
Yes.
legal settings?
Yeah, U.S. tax court and federal district court are very formal courts. They have a judge with robes on, and all the civil procedural rules apply. And on the opposite end of the spectrum is really the administrative appeals hearings, which they kind of run the gamut, but at the IRS side, at least, extremely informal. You basically meet in the office or on a phone call. You go back and forth. It's a one-to-one process with the appeals officer. So you have to know how to. One thing that amateurs fail at, and by this I mean professionals that may be in the tax field but don't do controversy, they don't understand the difference. They don't understand the difference between an appeals hearing and a U.S. tax court trial. They don't adapt to the rules, because you're absolutely right. There's different rules. I have to wear a tie when I go into tax court. I have to remember to call people Your Honor. I have to remember to, how, you actually depose people, witnesses, very formally, versus, sometimes you'll bring the taxpayer to talk to the appeals officer to answer specific questions, but it's an informal conversational type tone. Now, between that runs the gamut. Some administrative hearings are pretty formal, and almost to a tax court type procedure. And some are more towards an IRS appeals hearing. So you really do have to adapt what you wear, how you speak. The rules are different. Some things you could bring in additional arguments and facts and evidence at the hearing. Some places you can't. You better make sure that was all brought in before and everything's set, because the court will, or the administrative judge will basically said, I'm not looking at that. You were supposed to bring that in 14 days ago and you didn't. So
Kelly, the chameleon.
yeah, it's, in a way I like this because I enjoy the different types of ways to settle cases. I enjoy trying cases in tax court. I think that is, an enjoyable experience. It's very stressful. I'm exhausted after a trial. But to represent a client and do a great job at the trial, represent a client and do a great job with an appeals officer, whatever it is, I enjoy it because, ultimately it's getting a good result for the client.
All right. Well, lastly, what advice would you give to young attorneys aspiring to enter this field of law? And what skills do you believe are essential for their success?
Okay. One thing to know, I think any new attorney is, you are a problem solver first and foremost.
Right.
You're not a problem creator. You're a problem solver. You need to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So that is a very interesting, very important skill. Part of that is you have to bring value to the table, meaning you can't spend, $20,000 of your time to solve a $10,000 case. So you actually have to, I would suggest don't jump in face first on more difficult cases. Take easier cases until you build up enough experience to take on bigger cases, because you're not going to bring value to your client if you try to do something you're just not qualified for. But always think of the solution. All right, always be thinking of ways to solve, and make a tool chest of ways to do it, because there's more ways to skin a cat. There's more than one way to resolve tax issues.
And that's important to know, because I know for a fact that there are thousands and thousands of lawyers whose goal is not necessarily to be part of any solution. You got to be solution based, not problem based.
Yeah, civil litigators. I don't want to disparage them, but are they really trying to solve the problem, or are they encouraging their clients to try to win at all costs and go all out?
Probably depends on how their compensation is for billable hours.
Right. So I think one of the great things about being a tax attorney is we know who wears the white hats, and it's us. Nothing against the IRS, but they do wear the black hats.
You're going to find very few people disagree with that.
Right. When you're a civil litigator, or you do divorce or business litigation, or we do some probate litigation, you don't know what color your hat is. Your hat is you're the gun for hire. And
I've talked to people who said, man, in the middle of a trial, I sure wish I was representing the other side. I didn't get to pick who called my office.
And I never get that. Even if our case is weaker, I always want to represent the taxpayer.
No doubt. Well, Pietro, it is always great to talk to you.
Yeah. It's great to talk to you, Paul.
I learned a lot just in this.
Good. All right.
But what's the best way? How can people get in touch with you if they have a question, if they have a controversy?
Yeah. 951-319-7674 is our number. And our website is IE Tax Attorney. IE stands for Inland Empire. We're located in California. Taxattorney.com. And that's for California. Nationwide, we have America's Tax Defender, and that is, I do believe it's atd.com is our website for that.
Awesome. Well, I wish
I am publishing a book soon, and Paul, you'll be the first one to know when the publishing date is, and maybe you could have me on again.
I will. We can promote a book. All right. Well, thanks again, and thank you for watching, listening. Depends where you're getting these podcasts, but this has been Inappropriate Growth, and we appreciate you.